So, my name's Michelle Hodgson. Welcome to the Huddersfield Literature Festival online programme. And today I'm talking to James Canton, who is the author of Renaturing, Small Ways to Wild the World. And this is part of our 20th anniversary festival this year. We started in 2006, so it's 20 years since it began. And our festival will run in May from the 6th to the 17th. So James Canton is the director of wild writing at the University of Essex and the author of several books on Britain's landscapes and also the rural world. He's written for The Guardian, he reviews for the TLS, and he's appeared on radio and TV many times. So his latest book is out now from Canongate Publishers, and it's a wonderfully inspirational book for anyone who would like to encourage more diversity of flora and fauna, whether you've got a field, a garden, a window box. So welcome to the Huddersfield Literature Festival, James.
Thanks very much, Michelle. I'm very pleased to be here.
So my first question is, you moved from London to the countryside about
Yeah.
20 years ago. What was it that prompted the move, and what drew you to buy the farm labourer's cottage?
Yeah, good question. Good question. Yeah. So I am from the city as such, but happily settled now in rural worlds. I think what initially moved me was I was quite into traveling around the world. I quite enjoyed. I'd lived in Egypt and in Cairo, and I think about the time I moved out into rural landscapes of England. I realized as much as anything that though I traveled quite a lot around the world, I'd always kind of ended up living in cities, as I think a lot of us do. And I thought it was really about time that I spent some time in the rural landscapes of this land of Britain, effectively. I'm from London, so it kind of made sense not to go too far for me. My mum lives sort of up the road-ish, about an hour away in Cambridge, and so I was kind of looking for somewhere that was rural, that was properly kind of a new challenge for me, if you like, kind of from a just a kind of new place to live as much as anything. And so I've ended up here, where I speak to you from today. This little kind of, I guess you call it a hamlet. It's a small village in rural North Essex. It used to have a pub. When I first moved here, it had a pub. Now it has a really nice curry house and a church, and that's kind of it, if you know what I mean. So yeah, that's where you find me today in this, as you say, sort of about 500-year-old farm labourer's cottage that was in pretty bad nick when I moved in. And the thing about it, the thing that drew me to this place was that there was this small field for sale when I came to have a look at the cottage.
And that originally you used it as a cricket pitch, didn't you, in the summer to have your
Yeah.
friends around? So at what point did you think, I really should be doing something more natural with the natural world with this space that I've got this field?
Yeah, it was probably about 10 years ago. It was probably after about, I don't know, a good decade of me having moved in as this sort of city mindset and was very much like I loved the concept, that the notion of having this field. That was the thing that initially I was so excited about. And it's kind of interesting to interrogate why that is so exciting. But I think it was all those notions of a kind of this space I could just kind of be in, et cetera, et cetera. But then the reality of like, well, what it was kind of like, what do you do with this place, with this space? It's not a big field. It's sort of about 2 acres. But yeah, so it was for about 10 years. I would, I'd have this sort of annual cricket match and was ridiculously mowing well, the majority of the space, and gradually the amount of land that I was mowing went down and down, and the jays started doing their thing. They were sowing the oak trees, and the oak trees were just kind of growing up gradually around the edge of what became a smaller and smaller cricket pitch. And then eventually, as I say, about 10 years ago, I kind of abandoned this as an idea. Partly practical. My mower finally died, and but also there was an environmental push. I was just like, this seems crazy, and it was exciting as well to start to see the natural world kind of come back because, obviously what we're doing if we're just mowing down a bit of land is we're sort of suppressing it. We're suppressing the life that wants to live there. So, yeah, and it's like genuinely been a really exciting experiment that is ongoing. I mean, the book Renaturing, in a sense, one of the heroes of the book is the field, is this what I call the field, and the life that I sort of try to encourage to grow there. But obviously, the book also is telling a kind of a wider story of ways in which all kinds of us as individuals want to get involved in nature restoration, what a lot of people call rewilding. But I think as much as anything, for me, it was the journey that I was going on in bringing back biodiversity to this small field that I wanted to kind of tell in my book Renaturing.
And looking at those two phrases, rewilding and renaturing, I mean, you
Yeah.
do explain it well in the book, but can you just give a snapshot of the what you see as the difference between the two phrases?
Yeah, I think so one of the things that I should say right from the onset is like this new word, this neologism, renaturing. It's not mine. It's a nature expert, a naturalist friend of mine, Chris Gibson, who came over to the field. Yeah, probably the best part of 10 years ago, and and I was kind of saying, oh, I'm rewilding the field, Chris. This is what I'm looking to do. What. And I was looking for some guidance from him. And he was kind of very patient and kind of advised me, kind of cutting down um, old bits of bramble, letting it come up again, this kind of thing, creating kind of smaller areas within this 2-acre plot. But also he said, look, what you're doing, it's renaturing, it's not rewilding. And the scale at which we're doing nature restoration, that's the key. And I don't think it's just a pedantic kind of statement of intent, if you like. I think it is really important to leave rewilding to large scale efforts across the globe that are really trying to allow the natural world to kind of come back. So yeah, in the book I kind of delve a lot more into these aspects. But if you think of rewilding as being something like what's taking place in Yellowstone National Park, which is like 64 miles north to south by 53 miles across, then you start to get the scale. That's proper scale rewilding. And I think in the British context, and these aren't my thoughts. They're kind of me reaching out to experts. A guy just down the road from you in Leeds, Professor Steve Carver, who's one of the leading academic voices on rewilding. He was brilliantly instrumental in kind of guiding me into what rewilding is. And in the British scale, we've largely seen rewilding as being done by those people who can, which are the sort of the English sort of landowning elite, if you like. So they have a bit of land, a few thousand acres, often a bit of around a sort of central manor house or something, and often they give up the land, if you like, in some ways to rewilding. And that's the vision that we have in Britain of rewilding. If you go into other parts of the world, often the way they see rewilding is much bigger scale. And I think one of the messages really from the book is if we can, let's improve our vision of what rewilding could be in these isles. So yeah, that's another part of it. And I think it's really important that we do. In Britain, we've kind of like adopted this term rewilding and across a lot of the Western world. So it's become what's called a sort of plastic term. So people, you go on like social media and people talk about rewilding their life, or people might be rewilding their hair because they haven't washed it for a few days, and that. Which on one level is fine and it's just a kind of amusing reuse of the term. But I think on another level, it's really important that we leave rewilding as this term to describe large scale nature restoration and then bring in terms like renaturing for where all of us, it's a democratic process as well. So all of us, whether you still live in a city, whether you're like me, you're fortunate enough to have a small bit of acreage, or a suburban back garden, we can all be renaturing the world. We can all be kind of wilding the world in our small little ways.
So, what would you say has been the biggest challenge in renaturing your field?
The biggest challenge. I don't know. Challenge. I think often. But for me, in some ways, often it's been to know when to not to leave the natural world to do its natural processes, if you like. I think so. So one of the messages that I try to get across, the one of the learning points I've got has been that the smaller the bit of land that you want to kind of renature, the more intervention you need to do as humans, really, to for the highest biodiversity rate, if I can put it like that. And if you've got a 2 acre bit of field, often it is about oversight and intervening. But in certain bits of what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to create scrubland, so that I can try and get some songbirds to come in. So one of the big challenges that I've had in the last 2, 3 years is I'm like, how do I entice some nightingales to come and hang out in my field, and largely that's been sort of like, okay, create a bit of scrubland with from old bits of bramble, but also leave the blackthorn to grow. Leave the blackthorn to grow amongst the hawthorn to create that kind of scrubby bit of kind of wildness that some people might see as like untidy, unattractive, but nightingales see as home. So that's often a challenge. I think that's a kind of standard thing that we as humans often struggle with is just leave it, So we're sort of seeing this with a lot of processes of sort of tidying up, in the sort of suburban garden world. Often there's this kind of pressure to do too much tidying up, and actually, what we need to be doing is kind of not tidying up. Actually, the wild world, the world, the other than human world, often likes what we see as mess. Leaving bits of tree around, some branches on the ground, leaving the leaves, leaving corners, that kind of thing. So that's often been a challenge for me in the field, and I think it's similarly a challenge for, the small garden holder to do the same thing of like seeing things from the perspective of other beings. What do they want rather than what do I want or what do we want as humans?
Yeah, there's been a lot about bee-friendly plants, and that's sort of in no mo
Yeah,
way. And I think that the tide is
yeah.
starting to turn a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah,
Um,
I think so. Yeah, I think that's right.
I'm also interested in ponds. When we moved here, we inherited a pond with some fish in, and I was just watching the birds this morning on the kind of bathing themselves and drinking from
Yeah.
the edge, and that was accidental. But could you say a little bit more about? I mean, ours has got fish in, but obviously, if you've got plants, at one point you're putting tadpoles in there. What are the benefits of a pond? Why are they so important?
Yeah, absolutely. It's obviously one of the basic things that all living things need water, and anyone who's trying to sort of renature any bit of land that they've got, whether, as I say, whether even if it's a window box kind of thing, often if you've got a balcony on a flat, providing a water source. As you say, you'll get starlings coming in and bathing and that kind of thing. It's a really beautiful thing to do. If you've got a small garden, making a small pond is really, really good. And I kind of was busy doing various actions in the field to renature, but actually, one of the best things that I did was getting a friend of mine to come in with a big digger and dig a big pond because the field is on sort of high ground, no water. There's a sort of vague winter-born stream that ish runs in winter, but doesn't provide the water source for all these living creatures. And so getting my friend Digger Dave, as he's known locally, to come in with his 3-ton orange digger, listen to Radio Caroline for a day, and dig this amazing pond, like sort of 10 meters by 4 meters, and about best part of 6 foot deep in its deepest place. And what that's provided is just this other layer of life in the field that I really should have done it years and years ago. I should have done it as the first thing. It really is now. I mean, when I go around and talk to people now and they sort of say, "Oh, what would you advise should do in my garden or whatever?" The number one really is create a water source for all kinds of things. You'll get all kinds of things coming and living there then. If you're talking about biodiversity, as you say, Michelle, like the birds will come down, and take a drink, and so will the wasps. So will, you get bees, you get dragonflies, you get all kinds of things immediately. One of the funny things that after Digger David Bean, that first day, I just had this massive hole in the field and it rained a little bit that night. And I was, really excited. I mean, it didn't rain much, but I went out the next morning and there was sort of a little puddle and on this puddle were two water skaters, like already these little pond skaters were on there and they were kind of looking at me as if to say like we've been waiting for 10 years, what have you been doing, what I mean? And I do think it's often the case that the wildlife, the natural world they're ready. It's just we've got to help often provide the habitat, and ponds is, yeah, absolutely essential.
And it's interesting what you say about the timing. Again, when we moved here, there was almost nothing in the garden but lawn and completely changed it.
Yeah.
But that was on advice that, if you start as soon as you move in, then by now, 8 years later, since we've been here, all the bushes have grown, the flowers have, and it really is a much better place. Whereas if we'd waited to invest in the garden, then we'd be 8 years behind where we are now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as you say, like one of the like often if you're looking to improve the biodiversity in your garden, one of the best things you can do is do nothing and just see what's happening. So you might have a little patch down the back where nettles grow up, or some bramble. Just leave, if you can leave that patch as like, okay, that's as you say, that's our bee friendly area, or our kind of wildlife, our wild area. And often I think it's, in a suburban environment, I've had this people saying, yeah, no, I have my garden and it's like it looks wilder, it's got a lot more life in it, it's got a lot more bees and everything, and the birds go in there. But my neighbors, they pave theirs over or whatever, or then they sort of, you often have this issue that people sort of say, well, how do I message better? And I've said, and we've talked about this, a little sign on your garden. If you've got people kind of like tutting at you and my garden is very much like that. It's a wild garden, but a little sign just saying bee friendly garden or whatever.
Yeah.
And suddenly everyone's, that's really cute. Look at that, so I think often it is, we want to be good guardians of the natural world kind of thing, but sometimes that doesn't fit with the other humans around us, and we have to kind of like slightly educate them a little bit as well. And if we do that in subtle ways, I think it can be more successful, if you like. But yeah, be friendly gardening is the way forward, isn't it?
Definitely. So can you tell us a little bit about what you found out in your research for introducing animals to improve habitats? I'm thinking particularly, I love the story about the beavers building
Mm.
dams and preventing flooding in an area, and also
Okay.
this idea of introducing apex predators as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is me. I should say I'm not introducing beavers on my 2-acre field in North Essex, but it was kind of, as I say, sort of I wanted to tell the story of small scale nature restoration through my efforts in the field, but then going out to seeing other projects that
Mm.
were being so successful. So yeah, and I'm sure there are examples of this, around the Huddersfield area and wider Yorkshire. That. So I went to a wildlife trust experiment, effectively at the time it was, which was introducing a pair of beavers. They'd been introduced for, and just a few years. In a small village near me called Finchingfield that had really bad flooding issues, particularly in the summer. It would get a kind of, you'd get a thunderstorm come over, and the one stream would just flood the village green every year, really badly, and houses would be flooded and this kind of thing. They'd introduced these two beavers, and transformed this landscape utterly. And I went to see them in the summer, actually. The day after we just had what was declared as the hottest day in British history, over 40 degrees. The ground was concrete everywhere. And I was taken to this enclosure. And the beavers had just transformed this area. And it was this utterly Edenic kind of like waterland, and everywhere around us, we were like, everyone was like just dying of heat. And it was a really remarkable thing to see the impact that and let's not forget 400 years ago, there were beavers all over these isles, and then unfortunately we've kind of hunted them out to extinction. So the idea of bringing them back is not that mad at all. And particularly if you think in terms of how quickly, they're known as ecosystem engineers. These are experts, far better than us at transforming these landscapes. So yeah, beavers are a really good example. And then obviously what I sort of step into a little bit is the discussions that are taking place all over Britain about what's the best way to bring in other animals that affect the landscape enormously and improve it for the for the vast majority of living beings, if you like. So often what we do as humans is we kind of have to reenact the actions that other animals would have done if we just left them in the landscape, if you like. So and it can be a really powerful effect. So we've seen this, for example, at Yellowstone National Park in the United States. The reintroduction of wolves there has just entirely transformed this landscape because a few wolves, not that they eat all the deer, but they affect the behavior of the deer so that the deer don't stay in one place and munch down all the grasses. They kind of like the deer suddenly smell that there's possibly a wolf around, and so they move on. And so the landscape can come back, and in Yellowstone, for example, you suddenly saw massive improvement of greenery, trees growing up. Suddenly, the beaver population, after a few years, increased massively, and you start to have really changes in the way in which this landscape looks from a much drier, barren landscape to a much kind of greener, a more fecund world. So yeah, we can do it. Obviously, in Britain, do we want to introduce wolves again? It's a bit of a debate, but certainly I think we're starting to see reintroducing lynx, for example, could have really good impact, and not be too damaging on our kind of farmers' populations who have concerns over their animals, etc. So yeah, there's ways we can do this, and I do think there's real. One of the things that I got from writing this book was the kind of the positivity that is around there. People doing good things on small scale in suburban gardens, but also on the larger scale. The people trying to push for this kind of reintroduction program, that I think is just only going to be for the improvement of all of us. I really do.
You mentioned farmers. I was really interested when you went to a talk for farmers,
Yeah,
and it was advised to plant trees in crop
yeah,
fields, and that actually brought benefits, which sounds counterintuitive, but it's
yeah.
to do with the way the roots and the moss grow. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's about the health of the soils, as much as anything. I mean, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because once you start, as you can see what I was doing, sort of stepping out of the field and stepping into kind of these wider debates, and obviously, like we largely want our farmers to be growing healthy, high yielding crops of food for us, and it makes sense. Like it makes sense environmentally as well. We don't want to be importing them all from around the world, and that's, all kinds of issues with that anyway. So we want to support our farmers, surely we want to do that, but we wanted to support a kind of a more environmentally friendly, a kind of wilder farming approach as well. So this, as you say, I've kind of found myself in standing in the middle of fields with loads of farmers, and this notion of sort of regenerative farming, where we recognize that unfortunately the practices that we've been employing has been just depleting the soils for generations really. And so yeah, that was that this idea that if you grow trees back into the fields, rather than having these vast fields, you start to build up a kind of a healthier soil ecology. A lot of the trees forge these kind of mycelial, these kind of like lower level, tiny little level of kind of like health, soil health. Um, and you're starting to see farmers kind of embrace these kind of more wild thinking ways. So that was really good. It was really nice to see some of those practices in action and then kind of narrate them for the general reader because otherwise I wouldn't have known that a lot of this was taking place. And I do think that there are within these debates, it's often it's not simplistic, and as I say, Steve Carver over at Leeds, he's a very sound-minded man who was sort of saying, we don't want all our best farmland to suddenly be like going to rewilding. We want it to be growing crops, obviously, but also within that, what we want is we want those farmers to be appreciating that if you increase the edges, the field edges, so you have kind of wilder hedgelands and wilder edges. That's a really easy win in terms of allowing the natural world to be a part of that landscape as well. So, it also improves the soil. So,
Yeah.
as you say,
Benefits all round. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, absolutely, and what that it's not impossible to do that. That's an easy, simple way that we can start to be doing that and improving the biodiversity of our landscapes.
Well, I'd really recommend people to buy the book, both, as I say, for the ideas for your own garden or a little plot of land or window box or whatever you have, but also just to have a little think about the big picture and how things are developing and the different ways that it can impact the whole country, really.
Sure.
So I just finally wanted to ask you,
Yeah.
with your current field, with your patch, is it now a question of managing it and just keeping it going, or do you have any other particular projects for it?
Well, yeah, no, it's a bit of both actually. So I'm currently, I don't want to paint the picture that it's this perfect world, this 2 acre of perfect world. There's some scrubby bits that are still just basically rough grasses because it's old farmland effectively. So it's got high nitrogen levels. If you just leave it, it just grows really thick grasses and nettles if you're lucky. So there's a process of me trying to create more and more sort of wildflower meadow, which is again maybe I'm a bit of a sucker, but I'm doing that off my own back. I don't want to bring in tractors and that kind of thing. It's not a big enough area anyway. And I kind of like going back to the kind of older rural ways. So I have my scythe, I have my scarifiers. I'm kind of out there trying to increase the wild meadows. That's my kind of big project at the moment. And as I say, also trying to improve some of the scrubbier bits of land, helping the blackthorn grow up, hopefully get a pair of nightingales to come and visit this summer.
Wonderful. I think when you see particular wildlife appearing in your garden, it makes you feel great, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Whether it happens
definitely.
purely by accident or by things you've particularly put in there. And I think
Yeah, that's right.
Rewilding, it's amazing. So yeah, yeah, hope it continues and maybe a future book with more information about how things develop.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping to do. I mean, I try and keep notes all the time, and I don't know if anyone else uses the kind of Merlin app and these little apps that you can use, kind of like Plant Leaf, and you can just improve your knowledge a little bit. I'm not a naturalist by training, so all the time I'm trying to improve what I'm hearing and seeing, and I think that's all part of the process, becoming humans that are kind of better located in a wilder landscape as well.
Fantastic. Well, as I say, the book is Renaturing, Small Ways to Wild the World. It's out from Canongate at the moment. We have two independent booksellers we work with, which is Read Bookshop in Home First and also Fox Lane Books, which is an independent online retailer. So it would be great if you could purchase your copies from there. And all that remains to say is thank you very much, James, for chatting to Huddersfield Literature Festival today, and all success with your book.
Thanks very much, Michelle. It's been great. I've really enjoyed the chat. It is now 10 years since I fully handed the field back to nature, more than 15 since I unofficially began this project. One thing I have learnt is that it does not take long for a field to be dramatically changed from a fairly lifeless patch of grass to a vibrant and varied landscape. Hi, I'm James Canton. I'm a nature writer, a teacher on a course called Wild Writing at the University of Essex. And my most recent book is called Renaturing, Small Ways to Wild the World. It's basically about how we can all be involved wherever we are, small garden, urban environment, window box, or 2-acre field like I've got, in actively helping the wildlife, the bees, the birds, the insects to flourish around us. We need to find ways in which we as individual humans can help nature recover. How can we all play a role to make complex ecosystems, a variety of living beings, live happily together in the world? We need new words. Renaturing is one such word. We can all renature. It is a word I came across on my journey, one I adopted and came to cherish. To renature, to actively help bring nature back to any space on the world. For more than 2 decades now, I've been living here, out in the agricultural lands of North Essex. I came here to look for peace and tranquility, and to try to develop a closer connection with the natural world around me. So this is the cottage that I've lived in for many years now, and the garden that I keep here is very much what you'd call a wild garden. Lots of wild grasses, some wild flowers coming in here. But the main reason that I moved into this cottage is for the field that's out the back. So when I first moved here 25 years ago, I came and looked at this farm labourer's cottage. When I walked around the back of the cottage, there was a sign that said for sale, and there was a field, a 2-acre field. When I asked the estate agent, he knew nothing about it. But what I managed to do was buy both the field and the cottage. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was from London town, and all I did for about 10 years was used it as a cricket pitch. So every 2 weeks I'd mow it down, and that was it. And it was essentially just a piece of green concrete. There was very little living here. And then after about 10 years, what I started doing is just leaving the edges. And then more deliberately, about 8 years ago, I started saying, right, no more cricket. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this into a place for wildlife. So rewilding is large-scale nature restoration, minimum 1,000 acres. Most of us, we don't have 1,000 acres. Renaturing, small-scale restoration. It's about increasing the biodiversity in that space, and that's what renaturing is all about. If you leave some patch of your garden to be wild, you are helping bring back nature. You are renaturing. If you do not mow your lawn in May, you are enhancing the biodiversity of your garden. You are renaturing. If you are sowing pollinator-rich flowers in the window box of your flat, you're supporting the bees. You are renaturing. These are things we can all do to help make nature healthier. So one of the things around this part of North Essex is a lot of the land is being used for farmland. So, wheat fields, creating food for us, which is great. When it's very dry, can become a little bit like concrete. And that's the lovely thing about a 2-acre patch like this, where you allow the natural world to live how it wants to live. So this is an area I've worked quite hard on. It's wildflower meadow that I've constructed effectively. And the bramble, when I first started this, was right out here. Cut it back, dug out as much of the root as I could, and then planted it with wildflower seed. So now what we've got is this kind of evolving picture of meadow. There's fabulous things. You've got your ragwort, you've got a lot of thistle, and between them, they not only provide this lovely display of yellow and purple for the humans, but for all the insects, etc., they're providing all the pollinators with really good food. A lot of people sort of say, what should I do? What do I need to plant, etc. Often you don't need to do anything. So all this section through here that you can see, I've done very, very little in the last 10 years. I'm very lucky to have this much space, but I do believe that wherever you are, you can bring a bit of natural, sustainable wilderness into your life. All you need is a window box like this one. So this is what I call my mini meadow. Simple little window box, tiny really, but it gets that flavour of the meadow, which I think is really good, and you can do this completely in an urban area. I have literally just taken some pieces from the wildflower meadow and placed them into this window box. So this is corn cockle. It's a cornfield annual. It's one of the cornfield annuals like poppies and marigolds and stuff like that. And it's quite rare these days, and it's a really beautiful one, beautiful mauve flowers. Obviously now it's turned to seed, but so long as you get that seed to touch the soil, it will come up again next year. Next along, you have the classic, my absolute favourite, yellow rattle. So this is key for creating wildflower meadows. The seed is in there, all tucked away, making a nice rattle sound now. But you can see what it looks like in flower. There's still a bit of yellow flower there. Absolutely amazing thing in that it parasitizes grasses, so knocks down the fertility of your field, or in this case, your mini meadow. And that allows other flowers to come up. Next along, we have the meadow grasses themselves. And in any wildflower meadow mix that you get, a wildflower seed, you'll probably have some wildflower grass seed in there. And this is a really nice one. I think this one's called bent. And it's just a beautiful grass, and it just fits in and creates that mini meadow feel. So every morning, my kind of routine would be to come get a cup of tea, come out to the field, and just really begin the day by being kind of as immersed in nature as possible. Really appreciate the birds, the bees, the butterflies, the wildflowers that are out at that time. I might come out here and the first thing that I notice is the crows or it might be the first thing I notice is the ragwort, or it might be I come out here and there's a whole family of long-tailed tits that are just flitting through the young oaks. It's kind of become a bit of a habit, a bit of a routine, but I genuinely do feel that it's a routine that has calming influences in my world. The more that you can kind of do it sitting under an oak tree, just spending maybe 10 minutes thinking, right, I'm just going to keep an eye on what butterflies are around. That is when you kind of drop away from the human landscape, the human feelings, and you sort of step into this sort of other world where you're back immersed within nature. Renaturing means letting nature make the decisions about what grows where. It's about trying not to intervene in wild processes. It's about encouraging nature and learning from it. So this is ragwort. It's just one of the most important British wildlife species. The amount of insect life that is hanging around this plant. Everything from these amazing black and sort of orangish caterpillars, which are the cinnabar moth caterpillar. There's hoverflies all over this thing. There's ladybirds. There's something down here that I don't even know what it is, but it's moving around and it's quite happy on there. So this plant supports something like 230 different species, but 30 of them specifically rely on ragwort. So it's a really important plant within the kind of ecosystem. So the thing about weeds is a term that a lot of people use a lot of the time. I don't particularly like it because it is a term that describes a plant that is in the wrong place for a human, but for the plant, it's in the right place. So like ragwort's a perfect example. People see this, a lot of people would see this and say it's a weed. I would say it's a really important wildflower that is supporting something like 230 species. If we start moving out of the human perspective and start thinking about the ecology of place, of what is best in this space, you start realizing that, yeah, a field of ragwort is a pretty good idea actually for everything, and including humans, because I think it's really beautiful. So there are loads of ways that anyone can be renaturing. So one of the best things that you can be doing if you've got a bit of garden, bit of patch somewhere, just let some nettles grow. Let some bramble grow up. You might get some blackberries, but you might also get some butterflies. Other things that you could be doing. Let climbers grow up. Ivy's one of the best things that you can be allowing to grow up all over the place. Let it grow up over your fences. That's a really good way of going about things. It's one of the last food sources for things like bees and wasps. The last thing in autumn that they can feed on is ivy. Other things that you can be doing in your garden. Could you create a little bug hotel there? That's a really nice renaturing project that you can do, especially if you've got young children, or you want to do a bigger one. I made one here out of about 4 pallets. And you just fill it with things like pine cones, bits of bamboo, bits of old bits of wood, etc. Particularly really good if you're going into winter as a place. Keep it dry, all the bugs can go and hang out there. I think whatever space you're living in, there are so many ways that you can be renaturing and you can be involved in that process of nature restoration. So one of the things that I think
most people will understand, and a lot of us felt it during lockdown, even if we lived in urban areas, if we lived in the countryside, was the value that the natural world, that being in nature has for us as humans. You know, that's what we've done for thousands and thousands of years. It's what we've always done. We're part of nature. We're not separate from it. And, you know, processes that have kicked in within our species recently, issues of eco-anxiety, concerns about climate change, they're eased for us when we're in natural environments, especially if they're in environments that we are doing something positive within, if you like. So that kind of positive action, the idea of human intervention on small scale, is not only good for biodiversity, for the insects, it's also good for us.
To learn more about renaturing, take a look at my new book, Renaturing: Small Ways to Wild the World.